The GH5 is a excellent video camera. But most people tell me it's a piece of shit for photography. I didn't believe them. Well, recently, I do the coaching thing for a mountain bike team. And I brought my camera, because there's not much to do during the race as far as being an assistant coach. So I had the intention of using my GH5 to shoot video, but their photographer didn't fucking show up or something, and so they asked me to shoot photos. And it's really hard to do both good. You kind of just do shitty if you do them both, and if you focus on pictures, you end up focusing more on that, or you end up focusing on video, and you kind of get an incomplete story both ways. See, for me as a hybrid shooter, I have to pick one or the other. If somebody wants me to do video, I need to be focused on video. If I want me to do photography, I had to focus on photography. If they would initially had told me to focus on photography, I would have brought my D850 with me, because that is a much better photography camera. So the question here isn't, can the GH5 beat the Nikon in terms of image quality with photography? It can't. It's impossible for this camera to take better images than the Nikon D850. You're talking micro four thirds versus full frame. You're talking 20 megapixels versus 45 megapixels. You're talking, low light capability versus shittier low light capability. But that being said, the question comes, could I get the job done? So I was like, okay, so we'll see if this will make a good second camera for my future photography needs. Can I get good images that clients would be happy with? This, of course, was not a paid thing. It's a volunteer thing. And so if I screwed up, it wasn't like I was going to get sued or anything. So I did the best I could. Which isn't exactly the easiest thing. I did something I never have done in my photography before, and I relied entirely on manual focus, because I was using my Nikon glass on my GH5 along with the Viltrox. I forget what number it is. It's the little dummy fucking speed booster, 0.71 speed booster, with no electronic communication whatsoever. Some of the lenses, it doesn't even stop all the way down to f/16 or f/22 on, but it does open them up nice and wide and takes advantage of it. So for the first part of this, I shot with the Sigma 35mm 1.4 art lens, which works out to be about an f2 20 or 50 millimeter, pretty much, on the GH5 after all the math is done. And surprisingly, I was able to get very creamy bokeh, and I shot this at 400 ISO, which is the native ISO, and it's a little noisy at 400 ISO image-wise. You can take it down to 100, but that's not the native ISO, so you're kind of dumbing it down a little bit. There's a little bit of disadvantage when it's not a native ISO when you go below it. I think you lose a lot of dynamic range when you do that. So I wanted to shoot at the native ISO because I'm outside and I wanted maximum dynamic range in my photos. So if we zoom in a little bit here, which I believe this is 1:1, so it's a pretty clean image. I did run a little bit of noise reduction on it, but it's a nice creamy bokeh. It was foggy out this morning. It was, ready to rain and stuff. And, it got the job done. It totally got the job done. That is, in my book, that is a professional looking portrait. I didn't have lighting or any of that. It was all natural light. But given the situation and the fact that, I was doing the best I could with what gear I brought, the GH5 definitely gets the job done. I also found that using the Nikon 85mm f1.8 lens on it with the manual focus tools, because you got all of the focus peaking, you got zoom to focus, settings, you've got in-body stabilization, so you have a lot of tools to pull off manual focus shooting efficiently, and the focus on this lens is just sweet. Like, I was starting to get really good at focusing even on moving subjects, and there was a lot of sports type movement. Now, generally what I did to set up is I would focus on like a tree or some plane of focus where I knew the cyclists were going to pass through, and then while they were passing through it, I fired off I think it's 9 frames a second this does, or 24 frames a second in some cases. It has a huge frame rate. Like, you're going to capture the perfect moment, and it did, and it worked. Even when I wasn't prepared for some things to happen, I was able to capture them. And it's less cumbersome than my D850 because the files are smaller. They load faster in Lightroom. They get the job done. But I was really, really surprised that I was able to, because I thought I was just going to get a bunch of mediocre pictures for them, and then I'd give it to them, and they'd be mediocrely happy with it. But so far, they generally seem pretty thrilled with the pictures, and so do the families. They are enjoying the pictures as well. So if we go back in here, let's see if I can switch this over. Yeah. So, hold on, I gotta click. Hey, I'm not editing much today. So here's another picture from that morning. This is also with the Sigma 35mm. But as the event got closer, I wanted to be able to get a little bit of telephoto reach, because I didn't have a 70-200 equivalent for my GH5, and I didn't have my 70-200 for my Nikon with me. I left that at home with my Nikon, and because I thought that this would get the job done for video in terms of getting me close enough with the ability to crop in a bit in 4K, and also just generally this ends up being 120 millimeters on this camera. Let's see, I don't know. Let me do some fucking math here. Let's see, calculator. All right, so 85. Okay, no, I don't need to do that part. F1.8 times 0.71. That makes it an f1.2 times 2 for the crop. Makes this an f2.5 lens in terms of depth of field. So it was definitely getting the job done. Now, this shot was done at ISO 800. So let's zoom in here and let it grab its thing. Now, it's a little soft focus. That's my fault. That's the manual focus. You can see the focus was more in this area. But you got to also keep in mind that these were just going to like Facebook and that kind of stuff. They're not necessarily, they don't need to be tack sharp, because when you're zoomed out, it looks sharp to the eye, especially on small screens like phones and so on and so forth. You don't need to worry as much about how tack sharp you're going to get when it's going to social media. You also don't have to worry as much about noise. A lot of the noise is going to disappear when you zoom out. It's an old technique to be able to, down res your file, and it eliminates a lot of noise. So if you shot at ISO 6400, for example, but then you're shrinking the image size down to Facebook size, you're going to see a lot less noise, especially if you apply some noise reduction in Lightroom. So, it gets the job done, and that was the big question. In a pinch, if I'm traveling, I'm probably taking this camera with me instead of my Nikon, just this camera and some lenses, because it'll get my video needs met and it will meet my photography needs. These images are good enough. Yes, they're a little bit, more of a pain to get. The focusing of the GH5 is pretty good with the autofocus, using a native lens, and getting a decent manual focus lens is the other part of that equation. Now, I'm not as happy with the Sigma 35 millimeters focus ring on there. I find myself hunting a lot more, whereas this, I was getting some nice smooth, transitions. The focus peaking was really giving me a good idea of where my plane of focus was. So I was able to manually focus and shoot sports, and getting further along the shots that I was getting, these are all good images that are perfectly fine for client delivery. So it's just a matter of, they're not going to print huge, and on a huge screen they might not look as good, but I'm looking at it on a 50-inch and it looked fine to me at full res. And that, how I'd say the D850 is almost overkill for some situations, especially sports. I get a little more reach out of these lenses, with the GH5 than I would get on the Nikon. Even though I can go to crop mode on the Nikon, which makes it essentially a D500, the files are more unwieldy. They're huge files, and sifting through them, filling up hard drives with them, worrying about card space as you shoot. I can easily fill up card space with the D850, whereas this was on a single card the entire day. I was shooting the whole day. I shot 4,000 pictures total. Obviously I don't deliver that many, but a lot of it is just picking the perfect moment, the perfect facial expression, the sharpest image, that kind of stuff out of a group of images. And then, that's what, the end client would get. So, these images are perfectly fine. These are action scenes, broad daylight, and, and they're clean images, nice, clean, sharp images. See how sharp that tree is, how much detail is? You can tell I was a little rusty with my manual focus, but like I said, I knew it was going to social media, and, that essentially makes it fine, These are definitely, and they're definitely better than phone pictures, by far. Now, you see, I'm not getting a lot of depth of field here. I did open up my aperture a bit to give me a little more leeway in terms of getting a sharp image when they go by. You have to have enough depth of field to really nail the shot. So, if you want creamy background, it's really hard to do manual focus on an action shot such as this, other than focusing on a plane and then firing off as they ride through it to try and get a shot like this, and that's exactly what I did there. And believe it or not, I was chasing him and manually focusing at the same time, and I managed to pull off this shot, which is, it's a little soft, but it's got the creamy bokeh background. It's a close-up. He was literally riding right by me. I had the 85 millimeter for this. And so you can get good images. It'll definitely tell the story of an event. It'll definitely be a suitable second shooter. Probably more on the wide-angle side would be better. With the native glass as a second shooter, and then put the good glass on the Nikon for photography if you're doing two camera bodies. But you can't do much better than that. So there's that. All right. So bottom line is you don't need like full frame necessarily to be a photographer, or even get a paying gig as a photographer. If you want to be a good hybrid shooter, the D850, I keep messing with it. I keep wanting my D850 to take good video for me. And it does have good image quality video, but it is so unwieldy to get set up, to put a monitor on it, because the screen on the back's not going to cut it, especially in bright daylight. To be able to grab, there's autofocus is just as shit on there as, in fact, I would argue that the GH5 has a better autofocus system within its native glass than anything that the Nikon can produce, even the times where the GH5 just won't grab focus. Like the Nikon will hunt constantly, even with face detection on. It will be hunting regularly, and it's a jarring hunting. Like, I've watched other people's videos with it, and it's constantly flicking back and forth. Like, if I wave my arm, even though my face hasn't changed plane of focus, right now I'm filming this on the AX700, Sony AX700, hooked in through my desktop recording shit. It hunts a lot, and it's, so you're pretty much stuck with manual focus with the Nikon. It doesn't have the great tools for manual focus that the GH5 has. I mean, there's so many different ways to assist you with manually focusing this camera, including built-in focus peaking, which does not work on the D850 unless you're shooting 1080p, and quite frankly, the 1080p on the Nikon D850 is a pile of horse shit. You get all the slow-mo, all the 10-bit shooting, everything with this camera. I wish I could have a photography camera with the image quality and usability and speed of, because the as far as focusing and everything and capturing the moment with the D850, it is spot on. It's able to do it, and it's able to do it beautifully at very high resolutions. But the video is lacking, and I do know the Z7 has, like I'm not in the USA or something. The Z7, which is Nikon's new mirrorless offering, has similar image quality video-wise with a few more tools and the ability to output 10-bit, I believe, through the HDMI port if you had a Ninja, which I can't afford, so I don't have one. But, bottom line, the GH5 can take pictures. And if you're traveling, you're running and gunning, you don't want to carry two bodies with you, but you still want to get pictures. By far, I once watched Tony Northrup, say that he was going to replace the GH5 as his hybrid camera. I don't think he did. But he did make a video comparing the D850, the A7S2 or R2, one of the A7 R somethings, and the GH5 for video. And, he did it while he's playing pool. It wasn't a very great test. But he probably found that when he got out in the field, that for video, other than throwing it on a tripod as a safe cam, which is essentially what I'm going to use my Nikon for. It's going to be my safe cam. For whenever I'm shooting a video client, I'm going to throw it on a tripod, probably with a wider angle on it, unless it's a station, like somebody speaking or something like that isn't moving around much. I'll have a wide angle on it and get my safe cam footage that I can punch into, and it shoots high enough resolution. And I think even when you down res, to 1080, it looks a lot sharper when you're shooting in 4K and you down res with that camera. Something about having that lens does give it an extra level of sharpness and detail when you zoom in. And I've been able to mix the footage seamlessly with the GH5, and it does have a slightly better look to it depending on what lens I use on the Nikon. But overall, when I'm going somewhere, like I want to go out and shoot, or I want to go out and do some time lapses and stuff. Now the Nikon's going to kick the GH5's ass for time lapse. It does 8K time lapses. The most you could hope for is, depending on what way you use your GH5s, some 6K time lapses with the GH5, and just overall it doesn't really compare. But it depends on if you're delivering to YouTube. It's not going to make a huge difference because YouTube beats the shit out of anything you upload to it, or Facebook or Instagram or any of the other platforms. They're going to crush your shit with compression. So it's it's a question of image quality. Is it really going to pay off if that's your platform of delivery? But if you're delivering to clients, I think you'll find that the GH5 is your all-in-one camera. It really is. I keep reaching for it. I'm like, oh, this fucking, I got my Nikon just sitting there. I need to take it out for a spin, and I'm going to. I plan on carrying it around with me on future outings, just to be able to have the capability to take excellent pictures and to do some good lockdown tripod shots with it. That will take advantage of my 70-200 lens, which pretty much is going to end up being married to that camera, because the other lenses I can put on this camera and enjoy the best of both worlds, including squeezing more light out of my Sigma f1.4 35 millimeter. And it looks nice and cinematic and creamy when you have it wide open. It's softer, definitely, but I like the look of it. It's a pleasant softness, has kind of a dreamy feel to it when you have that wide open. So, you know, I don't know if this helped you or anything. As far as what am I going to do on this photography channel going forward, I bet you might be asking yourself that. I'm going to do a little bit of everything. This is kind of going to be my creative channel. It's going to be my fucking creative outlet. I'll be testing out gear, you know, doing different tests, practicing different things. I do eventually want to start teaching some entry level stuff. I do know that some of you that are following this came from my other channel and really don't know a whole lot about photography and videography and stuff. So I might do some beginner stuff, intro, you know, how to get started, how to you know, go through the exposure triangle, you know, what sensor size do you need to get started with, which honestly, any camera that you have, you can get started with today, even if that camera is your phone, which I would have lifted up if it wasn't connected to the charger. So please like and subscribe if you want more shit on this channel, and I'll make lots more shit going forward. And I'm going to keep, you know, this is a new camera for me, you know, in the past month, or no, it's been 2 months since I bought this. I'm making my final payment on it this month, so it's paid off. And, you know, there will be more cameras in my future, because I do want to get a cinema camera at some point. Now, that's after I've got a lot of paying video gigs, and, you know, if I get enough video clients, I can start shooting with cinema cameras, but that's a ways off. We'll get there and shit. So, please like and subscribe. Check out ScottTheTruckDriver.com. Check out my other channel, which is Scott the Truck Driver, for health, lifestyle, minimalism, keto, fasting. There's a lot going on over there, and some of my hiking adventures are going to go over there instead of here. Just depending on the focus of, like, if I'm doing a video where I'm out to shoot pictures of nature and stuff like that, those hikes will go on this channel. But if it's for exercise or health or strength training or just overall minimalism and survival and that kind of stuff, that's going to be more geared to that channel. So that's where that will go. So check both and shit. And if you're looking at ScottTheTruckDriver.com, you'll see all of this. Also, if you like this video and you found it fucking useful, if I helped you decide whether or not to take your trusty GH5 alone on a adventure where you might want some pictures too, I would confidently say yes, bring that GH5 out there. And if that helped, go ahead and head to ScottTheTruckDriver.com and leave a tip in the virtual tip jar, and I'll keep making these videos. These videos aren't currently monetized, so that's the only way I can spend a lot of time doing this, and this week I wasn't able to spend a lot of time. So enjoy, and have a nice motherfucking day and shit. Yeah, that was a quick video. It was so pleasant. Pleasantly short and shit. Yeah.